Jules.
Thomas.
Welcome to Speak for Change.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you on.
It's an honor to be on.
Yeah, it's not like I see you all the time now.
Since we're basically like cohabitating in an office together at this point.
Yeah. I feel like when we started Ignite Nexus, I learned more about your financials and your life than I knew about my ex-wife's.
When you walk into a Chase bank to go open up a business account together and you're like, oh, we're doing this. Yes. It's intense. No regrets.
No regrets. None whatsoever. But I wanted to get you on because working with you, I mean, I've known you for like almost a decade now, if not more or less. But working with you, I've seen just your leadership style and how you view business and even our works with nonprofits and all these things. And I just think you're just so remarkable. And so I just want to start off with, let's start off with some leadership stuff. I think as someone who has worked in a variety of different businesses and positions and who has a executive leadership certification and MBA and all this, the fun things on paper or whatever, like what is your view of leadership? Like what is leadership?
Oh man, just, starting with the easy question. Cool. No, leadership is evolution. Leadership is never staying static. I think that what I discovered kind of within my sort of like little sphere in my career is that I was never quite satisfied with my leadership. I think there's a lot of people out there who feel that way. You think like, why are you doing it this way? Why are you treating people this way? Why is this decision made? Why was it not communicated in a way where I felt heard or, attended to? And I think throughout my sort of junior career, it always seemed like I was sort of lacking in my own leadership of I look up and what am I learning, with some pockets of sun, right? It wasn't all the time. I was, definitely mentored by some incredible people, but they weren't usually my direct management. I think a lot of people feel that. Like there is, I kind of talk about the emotional burden of sort of the managers that aren't really managers, the people who haven't been given the opportunity to be in positional leadership, and yet they're doing all the work of it. Right. And I'm sure there's people listening right now who are like, yeah, that's me. Yeah. And I felt that way a lot. And so I think that when I started becoming more mid-level, not truly management yet, but I thought maybe I'm just not seeing it. I think a lot of people feel that way before they get promoted. Yeah. Like maybe I'm just not understanding. Right. Like I'm wrong. Like there's something wrong with me. Like, why am I always frustrated? It must be a me problem. Right. And so that's kind of when I went off on a journey to get my MBA because I thought, well, maybe I just don't know. I better go get some education and maybe I'm wrong. And then I went to UC Davis and I got, it's an incredible program they have there, by the way, like shameless plug. You're welcome, Dini Nava. But like really incredible program they have there, really wonderful people, really striving for sort of progressive leadership and collaborative principles. And I realized like, oh, fuck, I was right like the whole time. Every time I thought something was silly, it was. And every time I thought something was demotivating, it was. And I think that's when I started to find my leadership voice a little bit more was like, just go with your gut, like, what's right. What's right for an organization, what's right for people. And sometimes that's just opening up a conversation and being willing to learn. And I think that's where the evolution comes in. There is no end point. Right. You're not done. Like you don't become a leader and then stop growing. Power is in empowering those below you. Right. If you can do that, and if you know how to do that in a way that feels generous and is genuine, then I think the sky is the limit. But you never really stop. Yeah. Whereas I think I always looked up and was like, oh, they made it. Right. How do I get there to like some director or president position where like, do you just wake up and feel like you did it?
You're
Like,
yeah, I'm done.
I did it. Like, I'm a leader now. I wear my leader PJs. I drink my coffee out of my leader mug.
I have a leader robe.
Yeah.
You know?
My leader slippers.
Yeah, totally.
Best, like world's best boss mug. Like it's all there. It doesn't happen. But I think that's also maybe the sign of a healthy leader where you wake up every day thinking, how can I do better? How can I do more? What do I need to learn? What did I fail at yesterday? Like, what can I learn from that? What can I do for my team that I didn't do yesterday that I can do today? But I think that's also why people burn out.
Yeah.
Because the good ones are always asking those questions. So it's kind of this hilarious little like rat's nest. It's like, what is leadership? I think it's empowering others and being tired a lot. You know?
Oh my gosh, of course. You know, I when I think of leadership, I think of that quote. I think it's a Bible thing too. I think it's I forgot. It's like a servant to many or something like that, where you're here to serve others. And I think people forget who are in like positional leadership that, I don't know, my view of positional leadership when I was going through it has been like, oh, they made it and they have like this autonomy, like this freedom vibe. Like they must be like some better place. But once becoming a boss or, a positional leader myself, I realized, oh man, no, like now the work is just beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like, oh man, this person needs this person needs that. And sure, you could just be like, well, you just do it, but then you realize how much you would impact the culture of your organization, right?
Yeah.
Just by your actions. And I think I've learned that the hard way and the easy way, in different forms and different situations. So, let's say there is someone who's in a positional leadership. Let's say you had the ear of someone who's in positional leadership, right? And they are not doing that great, right? Maybe they can't even admit it really, but they're like, looking down on their employees more. They're not really respecting people's autonomy or boundaries, kind of, the kind of micromanage, the stereotype of the archetype of the micromanager kind of vibe. What advice would you give them as their, advisor or someone who's there to give them advice?
Oh man, another really super easy question. Man, I should have studied for this. No, I'm kidding. I think it's difficult because some of those leaders are not coachable.
Yeah.
And we've all met them, right? Yeah. We've met the ones who maybe you try to manage up and they're just not open. That is difficult. And usually I can suss them out relatively quickly or like diagnose that. That is a really tough situation to manage because the fact is it's never their fault, right? They can rationalize every single negative outcome as someone else's problem. Yeah. If they're coachable, I think there's a lot of things you can do. I mean, the first thing is to realize that the tone comes from the top. Like, if you don't like something that you're seeing in your team, they're reflecting something back. Yeah. It's a mirror. So you have to kind of look at that and say, all right, like incentivize the behavior that you want. What am I not incentivizing? Like, what am I not doing? Yeah. And making sure that, you're also setting a tone of respect. If it's really hard, especially when you go from, like, I come from a very hard charging medical sales background where it's just 24/7 pager, like running and gunning all the time. Like, I mean, you're just constantly out there.
Right.
To go into management is a really hard sort of like transition for people who come from that background because you have to be so aware of like, when are you sending the text message? When are you sending the email? Is this respectful to someone else's time? Because as a leader, they look to you and say, well, maybe I need to be working at 2 a.m, Yeah. Maybe I need to be working on a Saturday, and it gets really toxic and unhealthy.
Right.
And so, like, you really need to do a lot of psychological deep dive into your work style when you become a manager and make sure that it's like, hygienic almost, like that it is safe for the organization. And I had to do that, but I was very intentional about it. Like, I knew that I came from sort of orthopedic trauma that was nonstop.
Right.
So as soon as I started managing people, I was like, nope, that has to, like, any instinct that I might have, there is a send it later function, y'all. Like, you can do the thing when you're thinking about it if you're kind of an in the moment manager, but do not send it. Like, schedule it later. Like, technology is your friend. I also think that, like, it can be really hard to accept what you might not be doing well, but you need to ask for help. So some leaders who are like, my team isn't doing what I want them to do. They're not following my direction. It's like, okay, do you have an executive coach? Do you talk to someone about this that isn't your team? Because there are some things, and that might be like a mentor on your peer group. Like if you have a director's meeting, or if you have a regional managers meeting or something that you're a part of, like you need to find someone that you can talk to about these issues, because it is not healthy to just sit on them or not talk about them. I like having a coach, or, sort of having that as part of an okay, sort of thing to utilize. Cause sometimes people can think like, ew, it's a shrink. Like, I don't need that. It's like everybody could benefit from a neutral eye outside the organization to say, like, what questions aren't you asking? What are you assuming? Right. And it's really, really, really important, because if you're managing people, you're not just like, signing their paychecks or dealing with their time off. You're like holding their career for the time that they're with you, and it's an honor. And if you don't feel that way, get out of management is my big ask. And to the non-coachable ones, that's sometimes how they feel, is like people are a resource, people are a metric. And I think if that is truly sort of your instinct, maybe reassess that, because at the end of the day, like, it's going to affect your culture, which is going to affect your performance. So even if you're a cold metric person, like, that's going to come back around and whip you.
Do you think it's possible for a leader to become coachable without a sense of humility? Because, I think there's a lot of leaders. I'm like, I'm being optimistic in the sense of, maybe these leaders, some leaders out there who are listening to this can hopefully learn from this, right? But in my experience, a lot of people who are not humble, or they're not even curious, coachable is like almost, it's like a big ask almost. It's like it doesn't register. They're almost righteous in their behavior, And so what are your thoughts around that? Do you think it's possible, or is it just kind of finding the right people?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think, like, nothing happens in a vacuum. And I don't think that there's any, it's rare to find a truly toxic leader that in a vacuum would act like a non sort of humble kind of user, right? Usually there's pressure from the top that isn't healthy, driving that sort of behavior or attitude. So I'm definitely curious about an organizational structure. I'm curious about organizational culture above that leader to say, okay, well, is it not okay for this person to ask questions to their greater executive team if they're having a problem? Like, is the only question they're ever asked, what is your number? That's not healthy either for that person. It's really hard to be humble and open and lovely if the people above you aren't that way. So it's usually a systemic issue. I don't find it common that it's just one person. It happens for sure. The problem is it's trickle down, it's trickle down trauma.
Trickle down trauma.
Yeah.
Like that.
And sometimes it's the person at the top not wanting to have anything to do with conflict. It's exhausting to be a CEO. It's hard to deal with the board. If you're an executive director, right? It's all these positions are challenging in their own right and require a lot of communication, and sometimes you're stretched, right? And it can be hard to remember that the people below you are human because they're executives, you pay them a lot and they have a lot of expertise, and they've usually reached a point in their career where they're relatively confident. Yeah. And it can be hard to remember that, like, their life is hard too, and they need nurturing. So if they're not getting nurtured, it's harder to nurture those below. So it's kind of a top-down issue.
Yeah, you mentioned conflict, and I know you have some views around conflict.
Because I love conflict.
And so I'm wondering if you could talk more about leadership and like the uses of conflict and the perspective of that people should have or leaders should have around conflict.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think you say conflict in sunrooms and they like people squish, ugh, like, why is she talking about conflict? They have like a negative connotation.
Yeah.
Whereas I have like a super positive connotation with conflict because conflict is not argument. Argument is not productive. But conflict is productive. Conflict is just, hey, I don't see eye to eye with you on that. And we're going to talk about it. If you have really big problems in your business or if you have big problems on your team, like, hey, do we mention the fact that, like, I don't know, I'm going to pick on a name. Ryan is brutal. He never comes in on time. Like, da, 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 and everyone's whispering. Well, you could just go have like a 20-minute conversation as a team about Ryan with him there and say, hey, what's going on? How can we help you?
Yeah.
Bring up the conflict. And oftentimes that's the kinder, gentler way to go. It might be harder for that 20 minutes, but would you rather just be miserable and resentful for the next year?
Yeah.
Geez, rough. And that's not good for team dynamics. But sometimes it's up to the manager or the leader in that specific org to say, this is how we handle things here.
Yeah.
Is we safely and respectfully talk about our problems. It's like a marriage.
Yeah.
Like, I think, didn't you witness Nick and I having some adorable argument one time and you were like, is this how you guys fight? And we were like, well, yeah, we're respectful and nice, but we don't agree and we're going to work through it. And it was small, but you were like, whoa. Yeah. To me, that's a perfect example of conflict. It's like, are you open to some feedback right now? I had sort of an issue with the way that we tackled that one thing.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. It's almost like you want to do it from, you're saying this, but not directly. You want to do it as fast as you can, right? It's like, I think instead of not as fast as you can, I don't know if that's the right words, but in a way that doesn't breed resentment right over time. Would you agree with that? Or
yeah, there's a time and a place, right? Like, I mean, if you're hot, like, don't have the conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like, take a deep breath. But the more that you let it sit and settle, and I'm sure people, listening to this have seen this happen before, but like certain team members might run off and have a sidebar.
Yeah.
Ooh, let's go get a cup of coffee. And then they wind up having a conversation about it. And then all these little sort of offshoots form and politics sort of starts, bubbling up a little bit. And that's not good for the health of the team.
Right.
So having a space for everyone to like, hey, you know what, let's just suss it out. Like, you don't agree with this strategy. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Why don't you agree? And really let people actually have a voice. That's a tough thing as a leader.
Yeah.
Like, the team might not agree with you. And I'm sorry, but if my entire team is telling me I'm wrong, I'm probably wrong. Like, I might need to look at that again.
Yeah.
And that's a really tough thing if, you don't see your role as kind of protector or representative. It's almost like a political situation where you represent your team to the people above you if you're in a traditional hierarchy. And so if you don't have their back and if you don't really represent them well, communication is going to start falling apart because maybe they tell you the strategy sucks, we hate it, and they know the customer better than anybody, right? They're on the ground, they're in the field. And then I never communicate that up. They're going to be like, well, why did that never change? And it starts to become very frustrating for people.
Yeah.
So it really is on, like, say in my org, like me as a leader, to go to the people above me and say, here's what I'm hearing. How do we feel about that? And bring it up. Like, it is our job to bubble that up. Some people are scared of that, but it doesn't have to be scary. You just do it. It's like anything, right? It's never as scary as you think it's going to be. Just get it done.
I love that. I know, and one thing that comes up within leader, I know myself included, is discomfort. Is, like when you for a conflict, for instance, like as much as I hear you saying that conflict is a good thing, I do fear sometimes, like, oh no, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing? What if, so there is this like kind of fear and discomfort feeling when approaching that. What would you, advise leaders to do with that feeling if they're feeling that kind of discomfort? Because I think the natural response is to kind of run away from that, and then nothing gets, like, conflict is avoided. So I'm asking, like, for conflict avoidant people, like, what is some advice you can give them for them to help redefine conflict within themselves?
Wow. I mean, conflict is opportunity, right? If you are sort of at the beginning of your career and you're not in a position of leadership, conflict is where you learn. Conflict is where you manage up. And conflict is where you start learning those skills to be able to speak truth to power, to kind of say, hey, I don't know if I really agree with this, And you're going to learn something. It's okay if maybe you don't understand the full ramifications of a decision, but then someone's probably going to explain it to you.
Yeah.
If you ask why.
Right.
So yes, it's uncomfortable, but you're going to get smarter.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool? Like when you say, I don't know, you get smarter. It's amazing every single time. And if you're a leader, I think conflict becomes a duty. It's your duty to engage in conflict. Healthy conflict, obviously, but like really you're protecting the people below you.
Yeah.
You might be protecting them from not understanding something, like again, strategy or decision that's being made from the top. Well, protect them from harm. Tell them why. Communication is key. And yes, it sucks and it's scary. I mean, people have to communicate things like budget cuts and furloughs and firings and really scary things. But I feel like people respect being communicated to directly and warmly. Like, keep it direct and warm. And guess what? You're going to screw it up. You're going to screw it up. I screw it up all the time.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I stop doing it. It just means that I might preface it with, am I getting this right?
Yeah.
I'm like, just so you know, I might mess this up. Like, steer me on the right path if you think I'm going down the wrong road on this, but this is how I feel. Or sometimes it's, using the wrong verbiage. Like, everyone is, I think, a little bit more on eggshells in the last 10 years in management of like, what's okay to say, all of a sudden words are very loaded.
Yeah.
And I usually ask for grace and just, hey, correct me, please, if I get that wrong, or I'm so sorry if I got your pronouns wrong. Like, please correct me if I'm not doing that correctly. Like, it takes almost like giving people permission when you're in positional power. You have to remind them, like, you can correct me, please. I want to respect you. I actually think that the young generation is really good at that. I think that's kind of a cool thing. Back when I was kind of growing up in business, I think people were more nervous about, maybe someone calls you by the wrong name and they're afraid to say like, actually, my name's Jeremy, and someone's been calling you John for the last 15 years, I think I'm proud of the way that our sort of environment has changed. But there's still people adjusting to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love that. And so kind of to go on like a little transition here, you have, when I think of you have really built yourself up through your career, almost linearly or non-linearly. I don't know. That's what I'm here to ask.
Roller
right?
coaster.
Yeah,
vomiting.
right. You know, but you've gone from the trenches to an executive position, and you've even started a consulting company, and you've done all these things, and in our society standards are doing successful, 6 figures, have a family. You're doing amazing. Right. And so I'm wondering, for people who want to like strengthen their careers, people who are kind of like, oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to act. I don't know, like, kind of, is there any kind of advice, like steps or processes or way of thinking that you go into when you're just working, that have that you've seen bring you success in your career?
Ooh. Wow. Well, first of all, I need to just talk to you all the time, apparently, because now I feel great.
You do talk to me all the time.
I need to hear that. Like, I'm going to just wake up and call you every morning. Like, Thomas, tell me I'm doing okay. Yeah, I think that, it's really just not backing down. Life is really hard, and everyone is working their tails off, I think, for the most part, right? Everyone's working. Everyone is looking forward. Everyone is, how do I get there? How do I do the thing? And it's exhausting. It's mentally exhausting. we have a lot of sort of obsession with perfection and obsession with things. And it's gotten worse ever since. I mean, like when I was in high school, there was no internet, you know, or like there was like barely, you know, and now there's like Insta with people showing you their amazing lifestyles. And I think it does hurt a little bit when you're struggling to see things like that. And I think for me, I put that away. Like I don't look at the other lane. I don't care what other people are doing. And it takes a lot of introspection of like, what are you good at? What do you enjoy, you know? And instead of constantly thinking, how can I fill a gap, sort of how can I leverage what I already have? Because you kind of need the wins as you're building, right? Like you can't just be in a constant void of, I need to do 18 things in order to get X. It's sort of like, what can I be doing now to make me feel good and make me feel successful in small ways as you start building skills, building a knowledge base, building a brand, if that's what you're trying to work toward. I think that probably like one of the key things I got was a work ethic. You know, like I said, everybody works hard. I definitely think that I had kind of an obsessive work quality when I was younger. But that was out of need. Like I didn't have any money. I was starving, bro. Like, but also because I felt like I was learning things. Like I was going toward like, okay, maybe if I stay working in the operating room an extra 3 hours tonight, you know, not only will I make a little bit more money, but maybe I'll learn something, you know, and kind of taking that, like feel the pain now to get the win later. That's really important when you're building a career. Obviously, you know, everyone, you know, especially now, a lot of talk about work-life balance. That's fine, but there's a trade-off, right?
Yeah.
And I think understanding your sort of threshold for that, you know, it's okay to go a little slower, but you might have slightly slower progress. That's okay. Just know that and don't feel bad about it.
Yeah. So you're saying kind of work-life balance is there is a trade-off in our society, usually, meaning like you may not make as much progress as you want.
Sometimes, I mean, in my, which I'm not advocating for that at all.
I'm just asking you.
Yeah,
you
totally.
know?
I'm definitely not advocating for that. I mean, I want, you know, trust me, I look at Europe and I'm like, oh man, I want vacation like that. You know, and I want everyone to enjoy sort of the life that we have while we're here.
Yeah.
But like, if let's get specific, because people might be like, what the heck is she talking about? So when I was starting in orthopedic trauma, you know, one of the only ways to really truly learn and solidify your craft is to be in cases. So if someone is going to break their pelvis at 2 a.m, like, and they want to put an X-Fix on, I'm going in. Yeah. Because I need to learn. And so sometimes my work-life balance takes a back seat or took a back seat. But that was worth it to me. That was the trade-off, was I know that it's really important to get good at my craft, because if there's one thing I really prize, it's my autonomy. It's my like feeling sort of like a mastery over a skill. Yeah. Like I personally am very motivated by that. Not even the money as much, but like, can I be a subject matter expert? And so the faster I learned and the faster I got in there, and, you know, the more cases that I saw, the better I got. And I felt that progress, and that was addictive. Loved it. And I think if you can find something like that, if there's a space where you're like, oh man, I got another rep under my belt, you know? Yeah. I feel like I learned something today. Then you're in the right place, and like follow that drive, you know? So,
you know, you mentioned learning a lot and curiosity. I'm just assuming, you know, they're kind of interrelated. But how did you discover that you had a passion for you know, orthopedic trauma, or, you know, whatever it was, you know, like, how did you know that this was it? Did you experiment? Did you just get lucky and fall into it? Like, what was kind of the process for you to discover what you're passionate about?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think luck was part of a component. Yeah. Luck and maybe being in the right place. Yeah. So when I was 15, I started working in the operating room as part of kind of a school program. Mm-hmm. And then they hired me on because I was the young, annoying one who didn't mind getting paid nothing to stay. Like, well, we already kind of trained her. May as well just hire the kid. Yeah. And so that's where I got exposure to every type of surgery imaginable practically, right? Because I was in there. I was in the trenches, washing instruments and, again, staying late, observing, talking to everyone I could, studying surgeries. If I knew that, like, there were specific surgeries on for the next day, I would study them, go in. So, like, it's kind of interesting, junior, senior year, a lot of people are just, going to math class.
Yeah.
And I'd be like going to math class and secretly actually like, okay, so what's up with like carpal tunnel syndrome? Like, I might be able to see one tomorrow. But that was really, it showed me kind of my drive and interest in medicine in general. And then, I stayed at that hospital all through college. I wound up growing up there. That OR staff was my family and my support because home life wasn't as supportive. That was definitely tough. Like my parents were divorcing at that time. And so I needed that structure. And I think throughout that, I started noticing what surgeries I was more sort of driven toward. And my dad's a mechanic. He's actually local. He's an Aptos. He's incredible. He builds coach-built roadsters and race cars. He's like the coolest guy on the planet. Shout out to Chris Heil of Aptos. But he is an absolutely thrilling guy to watch. Like his brain, the way that it deals with mechanics, the way that he deals with the physics of a car, like all of that I was lucky to kind of grow up around. Yeah. So then you go to orthopedics and it's like, oh, this is just cool. All right. This is literally mechanics and carpentry and physics all rolled into one working on a body. Like, how awesome is that? There's still lag screws. There's still struts. There's still like, and so it really, it felt very home to me. Yeah. And so when I, started diving into medical device specifically, it just made sense. Like I would read the operative technique guides and it's like, oh yeah, cool. That it felt very natural for me. Right. Other people look at it and, maybe there's some people out there who hate orthopedics and they're like, ortho's scary. It's like, well, yeah, because there's a lot of moving parts. It's very complicated. But it for me felt very like it was almost like I had my dad with me. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And I could go home and talk about it. He'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. And it was cool. It was like, oh man, like, and he was a firefighter too. Yeah. So he had the medical and mechanical, then I had a slightly different mechanical and medical, but we could still bond over that. Awesome. Yeah. So that's how I started in ortho.
Man. So as you've been growing in your career, what have you ever like kind of passions shift, because I feel like we all are growing and transforming beings, right? And some people are, will stick with the same thing their whole lives. But has anything come up in your life where suddenly you have a passion for something else and now, you followed that passion, or have you kind of kept it solid and have ignored any kind of leanings toward other roads?
I think that especially as you season in your career, you start to notice like that itch, like something's happening here. Yeah. For me, I think it was talking to a lot of women in orthopedics because there's not a lot of us. Yeah. Especially reps. It's very few women are in ortho. And I would start to notice, or even young men sometimes, but a lot of associates would call me from like all over the country, right, and want advice from another woman, or somebody who's been around for a long time. And I started to notice I'm pretty good at that, and I love mentorship, and I love that kind of really human, genuine exchange of like, hey, I'm struggling, I need help, and then you're able to actually provide like seasoned advice to someone. Yeah. What I noticed though was, A, yes, it's exhausting, but B, like I'm not trained as a coach. Yeah. Like these people are calling you in times of crisis almost. And I might be naturally sort of good at it. And, they don't have to explain their daily life to me because I already knew it. And that's part of the real difficulty of a trauma rep is, you don't want to spend the first 20 minutes of your session explaining to someone what you do. It's exhausting every time having to say like, you don't understand. I have a pager. Yeah. I actually can't make her call today, whatever. So having someone that has like a peer experience is really comforting to them. Yeah. But I I was like, I like this enough to where I think I need to learn more. And so that is why I started diving into coaching. And I think that it really helped me in a way almost survive that, because as a coach, you don't inject your own stuff into the conversation. Whereas when you're sort of, mentoring somebody, you might inject more of your own stuff into the conversation. And so I was able to gain that skill and kind of let the conversation just be about them a little bit more, but in a more formally trained way. And I think that is a perfect example of me sort of saying, maybe I'll go this way a little bit. And, maybe I owe it to all these people calling me for advice to actually train on it, because I do think that it's, at the end of the day, it's mostly just active listening. But when do you really have somebody get on a call with you and be quiet and let you talk? It's hard.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to inject their own stuff. Sometimes you don't want that. You just want someone to be like, I got your back, and challenge you a little bit.
Yeah.
And the right types of challenge questions that aren't going to feel invasive, but do push you to reconsider or whatever. And I think I found it's fun for me.
Yeah. With that information, what have you done? Like with wanting to coach, realizing you have kind of some passion for that. Have you, what steps are you taking into fulfilling that goal or dream?
Man, I think it's never done, right? I think naturally I have a niche. There's people who really want to talk to me who are, again, mostly, a lot of people are medical device reps. A lot of people are trying to break into device, because I've been in that realm for 25 years. Mm-hmm. What I think I'm learning through sort of working with you and people in the community is that all these skills are transferable. I just happen to know a lot of people in medical device, but at the end of the day, it's oh, right, communication is broken in a lot of places. And at the end of the day, it's usually the same type of diagnosis. A lot of the work dynamics that even medical device think are special aren't. Yeah. That's kind of the coolest thing of what I'm learning, is just how similar everything really is. Yes, there's different factors, but at the end of the day, it's kind of similar. And I actually find a power in that, because I think I've lived at the extremes for so long that it's not that the problems seem easy. That's not the case, but they seem surmountable. Oh, we can handle that, And I think I've been pleasantly surprised by that, especially because, maybe I haven't realized quite how extreme medical device is until I got out into the community and saw oh my gosh, these people are amazing. And they're progressive and they care about each other. And wow, it's this is awesome. I want to talk to you guys.
Yeah, from, because we've worked together, right? We've been doing some cool projects and we're awesome. But I've been really excited and stoked to see how much your knowledge base from your just experience has helped so many people in our community already. Your experiences in medical that I think in your mind was purely oh, this is in this world. And now seeing you in action in these other realms, working with nonprofits, with local businesses, and, seeing you apply these stories and these almost philosophies or principles that you've learned from this other world, and having it be super relevant and almost expansive for the community. And so I think that's probably a real interesting thing I've been seeing. And I'm wondering, what have you been seeing? Is there any kind of principles or philosophies that you are starting to see through our work that is from the other worlds that you've kind of associated with medical device or the medical world over here?
I mean, I think I've just been really impressed. The level of humanity and care at a lot of levels of organizations here has been quite frankly astounding. I'm really proud of Santa Cruz County. I'm really proud, because everyone that we've met with who's wanted to have some type of workshop, or maybe they're trying to reorganize their structure or whatever it might be, the reasons that they're doing it are very, very altruistic. I think that has been a really big thread through. And so it makes it really easy to apply intentional management principles, and it makes it really easy to apply collaborative leadership because they're already there. They just need some of the structure, or maybe they just need someone to be a neutral party to open up a conversation or to facilitate, maybe a little bit of that conflict that they've been afraid of having, because it is difficult inside of an organization to do that in a sort of neutral way. Sometimes it helps, it helps to have somebody there guide you through the process. And it's interesting because while you can do that at my level in medical device, it is a little bit harder because I think there's really high stakes. People feel very personal. There's a little more ego. We've got a board, and yes, there are boards here, but I think that the boards in medical device can sometimes be kind of directive and a little bit hardcore. And it puts more pressure on upper leadership versus I think what I see, especially in nonprofits here, is just, again, it's this crazy thread through of altruism. People pick their boards carefully. People are wanting to keep an eye on equity and DE&I. And I just don't see that a lot in my other spaces. And so it's a huge breath of fresh air because I feel like you can apply collaborative leadership in a much more meaningful way when people are open. Shocker. Weird. It's almost like it sticks. So it's fun. The conversations are fun.
I think, from what you're describing, I definitely see it as almost like you've come from this world where it's just more intense. Like everything's more intense. And then you're coming to doing our local work here. And it's like you have this intense thing, you're ready to go. And it's like they're all like, we're good. Like we want to just really make this work. We want to apply this. We want to and you're just like, man, I can actually use a lot of the things that I would wish I could use with over here more in these situations, because these people are becoming more open. Does that sound right? I mean, it just seems kind of.
Yeah. I mean, I think in a way, in some of the teams that I worked on in medical device, it's really high stakes because people are also stressed and tired. There's a lot of that. Back to that work-life balance fantasy, right? But if your grandmother's on the table because she broke her hip, you want one of us to respond right away. And there is a very, very specific team dynamic to keep that healthy that is important. Which is where I cut a lot of my teeth in management and leading people is keeping someone motivated and positive when they're getting woken up in the middle of the night a lot is a task, man. But you get really good at it. And I think it means that when I walk into spaces that have kind of a 9-to-5 or, a supportive atmosphere, I'm like, oh yeah, cool. Okay. I got this, I think I've had to sort of work in the extremes. And it means that I think it's sort of a more moldable clay because they're willing and they want the same things at the end of the day. Sometimes in device, they don't want the same things. There's different pressures on people, much more traditional corporate, much more hierarchical. And it's not that it can't be done. I actually really enjoy the tough problems. You know me, I'm a psycho. I like it when there's a tough management problem. It's really fun for me. But it's also honestly this is going to sound super Pollyanna. It gives me hope when I see nonprofits like the ones we have in Santa Cruz treating their employees the way they do and feeling the way they do about their community and the missions that they have. It's like, oh, thank God. It gives me sort of a renewed sense of my own leadership in a way.
No, man, I think that is beautiful. You literally are coming from life or death. I love you when you give the example of if your grandma broke your hip, you want us there immediately. And I think people don't really think about that, right? The career path, the environment actually does have a key role in the culture, right? And if you're working with people who, definitely in medical, where, literally someone's life can be on the line, and do you really want that person who has the keys or the tools to fix you to have a work-life balance? You know what I mean? Do you want them to be like, oh, sorry, I don't work after 6 right now. It's about 6:30. I'm off.
I'm right in the middle of my leg day.
I don't work Fridays. I'm doing a 4-day work week. I don't work Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Well, it's also
So sorry.
it's also, I think, why I have such an intense, again, working at the extremes.
Yes.
It's why I got so into sort of intimate leadership, right?
Yeah.
And that emotional intimacy of a team.
Yeah.
And when I talk about that, it's not like, we tell each other all our problems, but we do have a sense of safety of like, I know that I can tell this person what's really happening with me.
Yeah.
So when I grew up in trauma, it trained me very early on to just be real with my teammates.
Right.
And sometimes that's jarring, to people who aren't used to it.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. If I'm going to keep names out of this. I was on a trauma team, and, when you are on a team like that, it is 24/7.
Right.
And that means that your life stuff that pops up might pop up in a big way on a night that you're on call. And we do not take very kindly as a trauma culture if someone's like, I just can't take my call tonight. I'm not going to tell you why. It's like, hey, why am I taking your pager duty on my off? There's a very sort of like, you better tell me what's up.
Yeah.
And then I've got your back. If you're honest with me and you're transparent, I am 100% here for you.
Yeah.
And I had a teammate who was a little squirrely, I was like, I had something pop up. I said, what happened? And he's like, my wife's having a miscarriage. I said, I got your back. He's like, so I'll take the day off. I said, you a couple days, go take care of your wife. Go take care of yourself, And we didn't ask him, we didn't ask him when he was coming back. We didn't ask him anything. It was, we got you.
Yeah.
That is a level of intimacy that is like required to keep a trauma team healthy. And it fosters this crazy sense of trust.
Yeah.
Where like, if you know that you can share something that horrible with your teammates and there's nothing but love being reflected back, then you're in a really good place. And the fact that he was able to share that with me was like, I was honored,
Right.
And he didn't know it. He was like, do I say this? And he's like, oh, no. She's got me.
That's extremely vulnerable.
Yeah.
This intimacy you're describing. And I like this term, like intimacy leadership.
Yeah.
Right. This kind of sense of, and it's kind of like vulnerable leadership, but to be intimate, you have to be vulnerable, And so it's like the intimacy leadership, like being able to build those close bonds with people and it's all based on trust, right? Like that seems to be what this is like. And cause like he could have just lied.
Mm-hmm.
He could have like tried to figure out something that's more societal appropriate for him to not be there, like a lot of people do. I think a lot of people don't trust because, we're in a society where you can weaponize that against somebody, and I think, I've talked to people who are always worried about that. I'm like, they're like, I can't be real or straight up with my leadership because my positional leadership, right? Because like they can use that and weaponize it against me. And me personally, I've been in that position where in community organizing, where people have either weaponized vulnerability that I've shown to me, or they've done it to somebody else I know who I really care about, and luckily I've moved through that, but it's hard to be that open and vulnerable in our current make of society, and so I'm wondering if you can speak on that a little bit of maybe how can we change this culture? I know it's a big question and it's just mainly your opinion, but like, how can we start changing the culture to be able to be more vulnerable and trusting with our fellow community members?
Oh man, if that's a problem we can solve, we can quit, that's like everything's good.
Well, we'll have the answers.
I mean, it's really hard because I think there's a narrative of hide yourself as a junior person. You come into an organization, don't be real. Hide your tattoos, for instance, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm covered and it's like, oh, hide yourself. Or maybe it's don't, and everybody likes to preach about being your authentic self. That's really hard to do when you're junior in an organization and you don't know if the people above you are going to treat that with respect. And what that means. Are they judging you silently or whatever? So can you imagine someone who lives in that world? Then they become a manager. Now they're expect, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
the culture that we've now fostered is one of hiding and one of being very cautious and one of kind of protection of ourselves. I think it takes a completely rebellious leader to just say, tell me what you got, and make them feel safe and prove that you're not going to do anything with that. And that changes an entire culture. It really does. You know, I've seen it. I've had people who I kind of lovingly think are sort of rehabbing from bad management.
Yeah.
Not that I'm perfect, but I am an intimate manager. I do trust, you know, that people will be kind with my information and I'm kind with their information, but it's an exchange. I will tell them what's going on with me. I will tell them if I'm having a bad day. Like, and you know what? They might leak it out. I don't care. The point is that it's radical. It is okay to not be okay. And I know we've heard that, but now we need to bring that into business. We need to bring that into our teams. When it comes to any kind of customer facing stuff, obviously that changes. You know, we have a job to do. But internally, how you keep people on the beam and how you start to change that culture is you do it anyway. Yeah. You know, people might find out that like your dad is sick. Okay. Well, what happens if they find out? You know, like trust your team to find out what happens there. You might get support where you didn't know you were going to get it. Right? Who knows? Like maybe you find out somebody actually had something horrible happen to their father recently too, and they want to find a peer to talk to. And now you've got another buddy.
Yeah.
And so it is hard if you have a manager, again, back to sort of that, you're holding people's careers in your hands.
Yeah.
You need to love people if you're going to manage people.
Yeah.
If you're not a people person, don't manage. Like, and full stop. Like, just don't do it. Because they can tell.
Yeah.
And that's when they start hiding. Or if you're very like, you know, politically driven, you know, and I mean internal politics, not like national politics, right? Like I'm not talking about that. I think it is easy for people to sniff out if you're doing things for your own gain.
Yeah.
You can't do it for that either. So how to fix it? You can't. It's just one tiny incremental step at a time. It's one good manager at a time. It's one brave junior employee at a time who says, all right, maybe I'll experiment with this. Hey, I'm feeling like crap today because I had a massive fight with my girlfriend.
Yeah.
Oh, shit, that sucks. How you doing? Are you okay? You know, I have some time at the end of the day if you want to chat, you know, and just if it could be like that, instead of like, no, I need those 30 minutes of my time because I need to be productive. Like, yeah, but look at the relationship you're fostering with that person. Like that is retention.
Yeah.
That is building a trust that you can't measure. And I think that does have business implications toward a positive productive sort of culture. It's just different. It's just built differently.
I love that. I have a couple thoughts on that and a question, but I always think of, it sounds so cheesy, so
I can't wait.
do not judge me.
Full Gouda.
My people.
Uh-oh.
No, you know, like 300, the movie, you know, it's like small group of guys who like, you know, Sparta, you know, the whole deal, fights the crazy army, the whole thing. That started popping up in my brain recently because of working. I think it's because we're working with a lot of smaller organizations, and I'm realizing how important like community really is. Because like if you look at like the whole culture of Sparta and all the things, there's a lot of weird shit, but like there was also a deep sense of like brotherhood, of like trust, of intimacy within these armies and even in their tribe, their community, with their wives and their, you know, everything. There's this really deep sense of like, I have your back and you can trust me to have your back, right? And I think the power of like what 300 is all about, like if you look at the philosophy behind it, which I just look at everything deeply, as we all know, you know, and I was just like, man, see, when you have a smaller team, how you have power is by strengthening trust and intimacy, you know, because then you're literally unstoppable. And even if you are, you would put up one hell of a fight, you know. And I think when we're thinking even of national politics or of all these bigger things, it just makes me think that we need some basic human elements, with definitely around intimacy, vulnerability, trust, and, capitalism is capitalism. It's a system. It's dry. It's boring. Even it's just, about free markets and politics. You know what I mean? But when you see the side effects on that behaviorally, you start to see people wanting to stomp on people to get ahead, starting to, think of the individual over the group because they can see, they can manipulate, they can influence these kind of things. So I think this is really important, basically what I'm saying. And I'm wondering, and this is like another woo question for you. But if you can boil down intimacy leadership into some principles, what would those principles be?
Keeping what is said in the vault if it wants to be. They have to understand that when they're coming to you with something sacred, because it is sacred, it's part of their personal life, and they're allowing you in, that you treat it with respect. And sometimes that means not sharing it with anybody. Most of the times it means not sharing it with someone. Other times it's, they share it with you and then they say, I need help communicating this out. Maybe someone has an illness and it's time to share it with the team.
Yeah.
Because it's going to affect a lot of things down the line. I've been in that situation before, and it becomes, now you're an ally. Now you help them formulate a plan. Okay, I got your back. How do you want to do this? Here's what I suggest. How does that feel to you? And you coach them up on how to have hard conversations about something that might affect the workplace. Because you have to talk about it at some point, right? Sometimes things are, think about like maternal leave, How terrifying is it to find out you're pregnant and then be like, crap, I got to figure out what am I going to do? I did that in trauma and it was like a nightmare, and I didn't really have a safe place to put that and didn't really know what to do about that. And so, having an intimate leader who can help you through that and guide you through that as an ally and not like telling you what to do and not, well, let me point you to the HR policy. Okay, that's fine, but shit, how do I have the conversation? This is really hard because many times those things are sensitive and they're kind of one-time things. It might be big life events that are scary or, I'm just going through a really hard personal time and I don't know how to communicate that because I don't really know how long it's going to be. Like maybe someone has a mental illness or they're going through a severe depression. Like you can't put a timeline on that stuff. And I think that treating it with no judgment is massive. Like, I definitely have heard it all. I promise you. And I think that being an intimate leader is being ready to hear it all, like without any kind of flavor of judgment, bias, concern for organization in the moment. Like in the moment, it needs to be about the person.
Yeah.
If I have someone coming to me and they say like, let's just say something really crazy, like to deal with as an organization. Maybe it's like, hey, I think I'm thinking of going to another job. Okay, cool. Let me see the offer. Let's look at it together. I have people come to me with that. It's awesome because they know I've got their back. Like in that moment, I'm taking off my manager hat and I'm putting on my buddy hat and saying, cool, let's take a look. Oh, I think you could get more, you could get more. Come on, go negotiate. Let's see what happens, Yeah. And I think the goal of an intimate leader is that no matter what company somebody works for, they're going to take your phone call.
Yeah.
I mean, really, let's boil it down. That's it. I want people to take my phone call. Like, I don't care how long it's been. I don't care what company it is. Pretty proud to say, I think that for the most part, like anybody that I've ever worked with is like, oh yeah, it's Jules,
Yeah.
Because it's never just about the company. It's about the relationships.
Yeah.
And then crazy enough, guess what? They tend to stay more because they like how they feel around that leader. You can always tell those people too. I mean, look in your own organization. If you're listening to this, like there's someone that this reminds you of, right? Like, trust me, that person is tired.
Yeah.
Bring them a coffee and tell them they're nice. But I think that they're often overlooked too. By executive leadership. These tend to be the givers. I'm in love with Adam Grant. He's like this incredible organizational psychologist, and he has this amazing book and a talk on givers and takers.
Yeah.
And these people are often givers. They're often the people that are going to be like maybe slightly less productive, but they're keeping your whole org alive. And you have no idea because all of their work is hidden. All of it is, quiet office conversations of keeping people on the beam.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of power in that. I think one of the biggest mistakes of an organization is to not recognize those people.
Yeah.
And then they leave and they feel this crazy vacuum of culture and they wonder what happened. And it's like, yeah, you didn't recognize the person who was really holding it.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. And so here's the second question. Then we're going to move to our question round. You clearly have built this crazy work ethic throughout your career. It's kind of what have gotten you. You got a little bit of luck, but I know you and I see you working. You know what I mean? Like, you're probably one of the hardest workers I know. Okay, so if you can boil down your work ethic into a couple principles, what would they be?
Know thyself. I know that I tend to be a very I don't know how to even put it. You probably know me better than I do, honestly, at this point. This is hilarious. I've never had to explain this in front of someone who watches me work. Random. So I'm like, am I going to get this right? Is the test? Is my self-assurance test?
Yeah, I'll check you.
Okay. I feel like I'm really good at doing a lot of things at the same time, but I have to stay organized. So that I have a very, very unhealthy attraction to whiteboards. It's probably not normal. Like, I love whiteboards. I love having something visual that I can look at. I love checking off tasks. I like trying to stay organized because I'm not naturally that way. I'm a very chaotic person. Like, I'm a chaotic thinker. I'm a chaotic sort of like a worker as far as my tasks. But that's why I did great in trauma, man, because I could do 1,000 things at once and get them all done.
Yeah.
In a corporate world, that's different because obviously you need to be more communicative. I've had to learn a lot of skills over the last 25 years of not being chaotic with other people. Like, I can be chaotic in my office with a whiteboard and stomp around with loud music. But when it comes to organizational communication, everything has to be much more streamlined and much more clear.
Right.
And I think that, that has been something that I've intentionally worked on. I also like to do things that are relationship based in the moment. So if there's like a client waiting on me for something, it like hurts me physically because I want that person to feel like I am holding them close and I am watching them and I am caring about what they're waiting for. Sometimes, life gets in the way and, people are waiting for a review or something. I think about that. And I think that's what gets me for work ethic is like, there is an internal voice saying they're waiting for you. I don't know if everybody has that. And I think that's a huge thing that drives me is like, I want the relationship to feel warm. And that often drives me to do things outside of work hours or call it unhealthy, call it whatever. But it feels satisfying for me to get that done. I think you watched me yesterday, right? Like, we had done a whole reorganization conversation with a company and
6 to 7 hours.
We did 6 to 7 hours of intense emotional work. And the first thing I did was come back to the office and fire off emails and start finishing up the notes for it. And, but that's because it was fresh in my mind and I was motivated. I was passionate, and I think that drives a lot of it. I think that's a good thing though. It doesn't feel like work. It feels like completion in a way, I get to put a little cap on the project.
Yeah. I've noticed you use, because your whiteboards they're always organized, which is great. They are. Because I think, and I relate to this as someone who is like a fellow chaos person. I think we gravitate towards systems like to-do list systems and different like mind map systems or different things because we know our mind is kind of crazy and we know that we need to kind of separate certain things to actually get them done. And I see you utilizing a lot of these cool systems and to get things done, and I just appreciate it. I appreciate the work, and so I just wanted to acknowledge, like, man, you do have like an amazing work ethic, and I can't wait to listen back to this and see if I can get it solid.
It's all damage.
It's
all like, this is just damage. I think the hardest part about sort of like rehabbing from orthopedic trauma, which I've been doing for a couple of years now, and honestly, it's really hard to break out. Is that if you think about sort of behavior reward systems, in trauma, you're rewarded for the faster you can respond to a case, the faster that you can get a script text set up appropriately, the faster you can have an answer for somebody. So like reaction with rapid and complete sort of like correct answers is like super rewarded.
Sounds like a entrepreneur training camp.
Yes.
Yeah,
100%. It's like, who can be here first? Who can give me the best implant? Who can give me the right answer? And who can treat me like a human? Boom, you have my business. Like it is so reactive that I think it just becomes a natural steady state of living. And so then when you try to bring it into a normal work situation, it's kind of like, oh, right, that's super damaged. But it's been rewarded over time.
Yeah.
You know, so that sense of urgency is very real.
I love that. All right. So this is our question round now.
Oh God.
Do you have any quotes that you live by or think of often?
If everything's important, then nothing's important is really in my head these days.
Yeah.
Without clear communication, you know, sometimes people in organizations are just given like 8,000 tasks with no deadline. And so you feel like, well, I can't get all that done. You have to prioritize things. Otherwise, it all feels like a big jumble.
Yeah, absolutely. What is something you believe that other people think is crazy?
Ooh, what is something I believe that other people think is crazy? Well, probably intimate management. I mean, we talked a lot about it, but I am into radical candor, you know? Like, I mean, I'm not going to say it's as extreme as, do you ever watch Lie to Me?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. Yes.
Yeah, what's his name?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Radical candor. It's like, how are you? And he's like, well, I'm late because I was sitting in bed thinking of Nancy Grace. It's like way too honest. Maybe not to that level, but like, I do think that it is dangerous and rebellious to think of intimate management because there's people in a junior level who are kind of like, that's nice for you. Like you're already in management. Well, I report to people and it's still pretty dangerous. If anything, I think it gets even more important the higher up you go, because now you're talking back to a CEO or a president or a board. And it's a little nuts. I've definitely watched my sort of like co-directors sometimes around me going like, well, she's definitely ballsy. But it's good. I think it forces conversation. And it's almost like, I don't care if I lose my job. You kind of have to be in that realm. And you'll find leaders like that in organizations, or even people at any level in an organization who are willing to take that on. But I think it's rare.
Do you have a favorite failure to success story?
Oh man, a favorite failure to success story. Oh, for me personally, man, I feel like I fail every day. Said everyone ever, probably. I don't know. I think that, you know, I left a company that I was working with for a long time. And leadership changed. I wasn't happy. And I wound up leaving. I was like, I'm out. And then I got invited to do a talk. And like, honestly, it was kind of a fill-in spot, right? Like somebody that I knew had to pull out at the last minute. He's like, I know that you could probably speak on this. So I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And I was feeling pretty low in my career at that point. That was like, I just had to leave a company that I really cared about because of a massive change in leadership. And I felt very sad. Like I missed my team. I missed everything I was doing. And I thought, whatever, I'll just take this talk. And that's where I met my, you know, CEO of a startup that I'm working with. And, you know, talk about a low point to a high point. It was like, I gave the talk. He was super into it. We wound up talking for like a couple hours. We put the chairs up on the tables and, you know, it just became one of those things where it's like, oh, see, you got this. Like, you are good at this. But it was really fun because I could have literally just said, no, no, I'm not doing that right now. Or, no, I'm not going to talk about that because I just left that position. And so it's not really relevant anymore. I was like, no, of course I can talk about that. Let's go. And it was really impactful. And 4 months later, after my non-compete was over, he came and got me because of that talk. And I called in sick that day. I like flew to Minneapolis, called in sick, and gave that talk. And it was really important that I did that.
What new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
Coming to the office with you. I mean, you laugh, but
Yeah.
kind of. Yeah, I enjoy learning from you. I think it's important to have people around you that you work with that invigorate you in some way. And I think that stretching myself and wanting to be around nonprofit work and wanting to be in the community more and communicate in a healthy sort of like intimate management way, I've been able to do that with you in this office. And I think it has been very, very good for me. And not my normal like day to day. But I think it's really it's been very positive for me. Not just because you're sitting in front of me.
When you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, what do you do?
Oh man. Sometimes I just sit and stare at the wall and procrastinate. That's real. I think there's people who can resonate with that. I make a list. I like to organize my thoughts. Like sometimes I tend to I'm overly harsh on myself when I'm behind. I'm not truly behind. I think I'm behind. It's like a self-imposed deadline.
Yeah, right.
Like, is it a self-imposed deadline or a real deadline? like what is this? So I have to I always question myself when I get into that zone. Sometimes I hike, but not enough. I like to do that, but sometimes it's nice to clear my head, but it doesn't really actually make the anxiety go away. Cause then I'm like, well, that was another 2 hours that I could have had. It's like super sick. I'm working on it, guys. But at the end of the day, I think, prioritization and really, really questioning where the anxiety is coming from is important for me. And then usually it's just doing the thing. Yeah. Get it done, get it off the list and you'll be fine. I feel immediately better.
If you had one gift or one book to gift somebody, what would it be?
Man, probably Give and Take by Adam Grant. For sure. There's no downside to reading Adam Grant ever. He's the best.
Who do you think of when you hear the word successful?
Oh man. Honestly, not one person. Everyone I know. I think waking up is a success these days.
Yeah.
Seriously. I'm not like, I don't mean that in a flippant way. I think having the balls to get up and do it again is something to be commended because it is not easy right now, especially like where we are as a country, where we are in sort of like society. It has gotten harder for people every single day to get up and do the thing and to feel good about it. Yeah.
What advice would you give yourself 10 years ago?
What year is it? 2024? 2014. What was 2014? 2014. Oh man, 2014 I had my son. I had my first son, Miles. I guess my advice would be, you're doing fine. Yeah. It's not even advice. It's just like, hey, it feels like a lot right now, but you're doing fine. That was really tough. That was like newborn in trauma. I went back to work 5 weeks after I had him on his due date because he was early. It was a mess. And I think I just felt really like stretched, felt really tired and just you're doing okay.
What is something people often get wrong about you?
I've been called intimidating and I don't get it. Like, this about me. I'm always confused by that. And maybe I don't understand it fully, but I've been said I'm intimidating. Weirds me out. I don't feel like I'm intimidating. I'm a nice lady, I promise.
Mm-hmm. What is the worst advice you have received?
Well, especially in the same vein as intimate management, I was told at a very young age as a professional that I wear my heart on my sleeve, and that is a terrible thing. And it was from an older male manager, act surprised, where he said, you're just too honest. You just say what you're thinking, and that's going to hurt you. And I kind of looked at him and was like, I mean, only because you find it hurtful. Like, I'm just telling you what I think. You asked me a question, and it was very confusing for me. I think I was probably 17 or 18, and I certainly wasn't by any means being overly aggressive about anything. He asked me a question, I gave him an answer. I was like, okay, like straight shooter, let's go. Yeah. And I found that advice very confusing, and I still find it confusing.
If you put anything you wanted on a billboard, what would it say?
Question everything.
Dig that. What does positive change in yourself and the world look like to you?
I think when we can be honest with each other and not feel like it has some massive like cost.
Yeah.
You know, when we can actually have conversations that are productive, that don't feel like relationships are going to end and the world's going to fall apart. You know, especially right now, obviously there's a lot going on in politics and it feels very heavy. It feels like, oh my God, can we talk about it? I mean, you what if you meet someone in the line, you know, at the store? It's like, and you see a magazine cover and it's crazy. It's like, I don't even know if I can comment on that. Yeah. Who are they? What side are they on? Like the feeling that sense of heaviness of like, can we even talk about it? Yeah. Is really scary to me. I don't like that.
All right. So here are the two silly questions.
Oh my God.
All right. They're silly.
Cool.
Ask, what is your astrology sign and do you resonate with it?
Oh, see, I don't know as much about astrology as you do. So I'm a Scorpio. I think I resonate with some parts of it. I probably need to like learn more, but I do feel kind of intense sometimes. Yeah. I think I do have kind of a high energy, high intensity personality. So I guess that fits, but I've also heard Scorpios described as like mysterious, and I feel 0% mysterious.
Or intimidating.
Damn you. Damn you. Yeah, I don't feel mysterious, man. I feel like if somebody asked me like any question, I'd probably just tell them what's up. Like so I think that kind of always feels a little bit like, it feels like I'm supposed to be some like dark, sultry mistress in the back, like, you know, having a drink with the brim of my hat turned down or something. And I'm like, I'm a total nerd running around the grocery store picking out fruit. You know, I don't know. Like, I feel dorky than, you know, compared to like what a traditional Scorpio sounds like.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right. And this one's, if you had a power animal or an animal that would inspire you, what would it be?
Maybe like a meerkat?
A meerkat?
I mean, they're adorable. They're little sentinels. They
like
just
the ones that just pop up?
Yes. And they guard the house and they look around and they're protecting everyone.
Why did I just think of Nick?
Because Nick's adorable and it's kind of a meerkat. Yeah, I don't know. I think they're hilarious, anxious, social little creatures, which kind of resonates with me for some reason. Like they're like little perfectionists and they want to make sure everyone is cool and watched out for, but they're brave, you know, go out there by themselves and, you know, like look out for everybody.
Yeah.
They have little societies. Meerkats are awesome.
Little societies.
They have these crazy little meerkat societies.
That's
I think
amazing.
they're the cutest.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right. So here's your part to say where can people find you? How can people contact you? What's going on? Like, do you have anything that you want to just a shout out? This is your time.
Ooh.
You could even put like some words of wisdom if you want. But this is your time. Just give me a thumbs up or I'm done. And
yeah, like a white flag, like I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, they can find me obviously ignitenexus.co, which is with you. So anything, you know, if you run into Thomas, you're running into me too. Just say, hey, where do I find that Jules kid? And I'll be close behind probably. I am also Jules at ignitenexus.co. That's my email address. But really, I'm here for whatever people want. I think where I really thrive is especially like mock interviewing or coaching or even making a resume for people. Like I really enjoy watching people transition into different careers or go into a new career, prep for interviews. That I find that super fun. I really like coaching around that. That's kind of my happy spot for individual people. And then for organizations, like you heard me chat about like intimate management and difficult management problems. Like I really like going into an org and helping them diagnose if there's something that is not quite going the way they want it to go. Plus I get to do it with you. So I feel like that's extremely fun for me. And then just come to our quarterly mixers. I think that it's such an easy peasy, free, like donation only way to meet your community. I really enjoy those because I get to see people kind of pat themselves on the back for the hard work that they did that quarter. And I feel like that's becoming a core part of our culture as a company, that we give that space. So I would say, come to our quarterly mixers and say hi. Just say hi. That makes me happy.
Jules, it was an honor to have you on Speak for Change. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
This has been Speak for Change podcast. I'm your host, Thomas H. Patterson. Thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful day.